Hiya, you know what time it is? Get into it. Get into it, okay? It is my favorite day of the week, Wednesdays. I've had a pretty good day. Got through a couple of meetings I had to deal with this morning. I had to take a couple of long phone calls, but overall it has been a wonderful, wonderful day. And, oops, excuse me, usually I do story time in the evenings, but on my days off, I try to move that earlier into the day. And for those who have been watching on Instagram, we are going to continue our story time with The Last Unicorn, Chapter 8. Probably tonight, don't quote me on that, but probably tonight we'll continue that. But we're back here with Brian Jacque's The Redwall series. And it's gonna be pretty interesting. And of course, I don't own the music that is being played in the background. Which, any of my sci-fi fans remember Dinotopia growing up? Does anybody remember that TV show from the 90s? It was a good show. It was a good show. Because it had dinosaurs, high adventure, and ancient technology. It was a really cool show. It did not last super duper long, but it did exist, which brings me, because I know I've showed this before on my channel, but I have the original Dinotopia book. It literally is a whole illustrated novel. And one day, we will... Hi, sweetie. Well, since y'all are having nap time, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Once I put this giant book back. Okay, there we go. Chapter 10. Seela the fox continued to complain. She must have a certain type of herb that was not in her kit. It could only be found in mossflower wood at the dark of night. Clooney listened to the fox's pleas, knowing that they were merely an excuse to gain her freedom. He paused as if to deliberate, watching the hopeful expression on Seela's face.
I can see that you need this herb. So why don't you send your son Chickenhound to get it?
Seela was never stuck for a ready answer.
No, I'm afraid that's useless, sir. He's too young and inexperienced. Chickenhound wouldn't know where to start looking.
Clooney nodded sympathetically.
Aye, you're probably right. I suppose I have to stretch a point. You can go off to the woods to search for this vital herb. But be warned, Fox. There'll be two rats with you all the time. One false move and I'll have that bushy tail of yours to trim the collar of my war coat. Is that understood?
Seela's head bobbed vigorously.
Of course, sir. What reason would I have to play you false? I'm looking forward to a good share of plunder once I've healed you and Redwall is conquered.
The huge tail snaked out and caressed the fox.
Of course you are, my friend. How silly of me.
Clooney actually smiled. Seela shuddered. That evening, Seela left the church, accompanied by Redtooth and Fangbird. Secretly, she could have danced with delight. Only 2 guards. With her knowledge of moss flowers, Seela could quite easily give them the slip for 15 minutes or so. Back at the church, Clooney had risen from his bed. He attempted an exploratory walk, leaning on his banner as he stumped gingerly around the room. Good. In a short while, he would be back to his old self again. Clooney spoke aloud to the picture of Martin, bound to his standard.
Ha! That fox should easily give those idiots of mine the slip. Then she could deliver my false plans to your abbot. It's all going along quite smoothly. Bit of a blow for your side, eh, mouse?
Twilight tinged mossflower wood. Seela sniffed the breeze. She glanced up at the sky. It would soon be dark, and she could keep her rendezvous with the mouse abbot at the old stump. Redtooth and Fangbird were both unhappy and uncomfortable. For the last hour, Seela had led them through stinging nettles, swarms of midges, and marshy ground. They blundered along, hacking at the undergrowth with cutlass and spear.
I think we must be somewhere near the Mouse Abbey, Fangbird said. Stow the gab! Keep your eyes on the fox!
Redtooth snarled. I wish I'd brought some lanterns along with us, Fangbird whined. Redtooth, already dangerously thin patience, snapped. He grabbed hold of his sniveling crony and started shaking him. Listen, thickhead, if you don't stop your moaning, I'll chop your tongue out with my cutlass. Do you hear me? Fangburn struggled free. Angrily, he jabbed at Redtooth with a spear. You dare try anything like that, blood old bread knife, and I'll spear your gizzard before you can blink an eye. Oh, you will you? Yes, I will, smarty rat. Then take that, big mouth. Ouch! Punch me, will you? I'll soon show you. Together the rats crashed into a prickling bush, kicking, biting, and pummeling each other. Claws, tails, and teeth came into play. They went at it, hammer and tongs, for several minutes until Redtooth emerged the victor. His nose was bleeding and he lost a tooth, but he was in better shape than his opponent. Fangbird crawled miserably out of the wrecked bush. Both eyes were blacked, a chunk of his left ear was missing, and his whole body was covered in long, raking claw marks and prickles. He bent painfully to retrieve his spear. Seizing the opportunity, Redtooth landed him a mighty kick on the bottom. His nose plowed up a furrow of soil. Panting furiously, Redtooth berated Fangbird. You half-witted fool! Now see what you've done! While you were busy assaulting a superior officer, you let the fox escape! Fangbird sat up. He winced through discolored eyes. I let the fox escape? Me? Oh no, you're the one in charge. You let her get away, not me. Wait till I report this to Clooney. I'll tell him that you... Will you shut up? Redtooth yelled. It's no use us standing here arguing. We'd better get searching for the fox. I'll go this way and you go that way. The first one to find her keeps shouting until the other arrives. Have you got that? Now get moving. The two rats stumbled off through the woods in different directions. Meanwhile, in another part of Mossflower Wood, Seela sneaked along looking from left to right. There was the three-topped oak. There was the abbey wall. Ah, here it was, the old stump. The moonlight illuminated the scene clearly. She was alone. Where was the mouse abbot? A heavy paw clamped itself around Seela's neck from behind. Her tongue shot out, struggling uselessly. She gagged and choked. Constance's gruff voice growled into her ear. Be still, fox, or I'll snap your neck like a dead twig. Seela froze. There was nothing more dangerous than a fully grown badger. Their strength and ferocity were renowned. Constance's free paw snapped the herb pouch from the fox's belt. She shook the contents out onto the stump. Grabbing the copy of Clooney's invasion plans, she studied it briefly, then stuffed it into her belt.
Your abbot was supposed to meet me with a reward,
Seela whispered. The badger's eyes blazed with contempt as she spun the vixen around. Here's your reward, traitor! Whoop! Constance dealt Seela a sharp blow between the ears. The fox fell in a senseless heap. Constance ducked behind a tree and called out in a high-pitched voice, Over here! I've got the fox! Quick, over here! Redtooth was first to arrive. He came dashing through the bushes and halted at the sight of the unconscious fox among the ferns. Hell's teeth, where's Fangburn? Where in the devil do you mean slinking off like that? Get up on your feet and answer me. Constance emerged from behind the tree. I don't think she'll wake up for a while yet. Fancy meeting you here, rat. Redtooth got over his surprise quickly. Seeing the badger unarmed, he switched his cutlass through the air and smiled menacingly. Well, well, it's the friend of the mice, so we meet again, badger. Constance stood tall, her huge paws folded. Redtooth, isn't it? I see you still don't remember from your defeat at the wall. I told you that we had a score to settle. Redtooth bared his teeth and snarled. I'm gonna enjoy this, badger. I'll make sure you die slowly. The rat leaped at Constance, swinging his cutlass expertly. For a heavy badger, his adversary moved lightly and skillfully. Neatly sidestepping a cutlass thrust, she cuffed the rat smartly on the point of the nose. Stung into retaliation, Redtooth charged Constance with the point of his blade. A fierce kick in the ribs and a swift chop to the claw sent the rat and the cutlass in opposite directions. Redtooth lay winded upon the ground. Constance leaned over him. "Get up and retrieve your weapon," the badger growled. As Redtooth stood, he grabbed a handful of earth and flung it in Constance's eyes. The big badger staggered back, rubbing at the grit which clogged her vision. The rat picked up the cutlass and swung it, slashing wildly at the enemy's thick fur. He scored several hits. Suddenly, panic gripped him. The wounded badger had seized the blade regardless of its keen edge. Constance pulled Redtooth in close. She gave a sideways push, snapping the cutlass blade into two pieces. Kicking the rat over on his back, she flung the broken blade away and grabbed the rodent's tail tightly with both paws. Redtooth screamed in terror as he felt himself leave the ground to go spinning aloft over the badger's head, with his tail pulled taut and the wind whistling through his fangs. Redtooth howled as the trees went by in a green blur. Like an athlete throwing the hammer, Constance whirled on her hind legs faster and faster until suddenly she threw her burden with a colossal heave. Kind of like DJ Jazzy Jeff, how he got thrown out of the house on Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Ah! Redtooth would have flown a record distance had there not been a stout sycamore tree several yards away. Ignoring her injuries, Constance called into the surrounding woods. "Over here! He's over here!" She leaped swiftly off in the direction of Redwall with captured plans. Only moments later, Fangbird came blundering through the ferns. He tripped upon the groaning fox, who was just coming round. "Here! What's happened? Where's Redtooth?" he asked anxiously. Seela sat up rubbing her head, trying to recognize her surroundings. She saw the old stump littered with her herbs and potions. The pouch lay nearby. Holding her head with both paws, she tried to halt the thumping ache. Dang that badger's hide. She'd taken the plants from Seela as if she were confiscating acorns from a baby mouse. So much for the rich rewards. Fangbird prodded Seela with the spear. "Hey you, pay attention. I asked you where Redtooth is." Seela probed a loosened tooth with her tongue. "Leave me alone. How should I know?" Fangbird persisted. "Now listen, Fox. I want to know what's been going on here. I'm sure I heard Redtooth call you out. Hell's whiskers. Wait until Clooney gets to hear about this." Seela pointed a shaky paw. "There's your rat by that big sycamore yonder. Huh. Looks like he's had a spot of bother, too." Fangbird touched Redtooth with his foot. "He's dead. Look, the sword's been broken in two." The fox and the rat stood looking at each other, their thoughts running on parallel lines. It was fairly obvious what must be done if they were to save their skins. "Right. We'd better work out a good story to tell Clooney when we get back. He's not stupid, so we'd better get it right." The unlucky pair stumbled off through the nighttime woodland, gesticulating and muttering together, weaving a fabric of lies that they would hope would satisfy Clooney the Scourge. Chapter 11. Once again, the abbot's room was the scene of a late repast. The news that Constance had brought showed with a doubt that Clooney would soon be on the attack again. Abbot Mortimer was the first to admit that he had been mistaken. "The intelligence brought to us by our friend Constance is conclusive. Clooney will never rest until he has Redwall under his heel. Therefore, I feel that I must apologize for my misjudgment of the situation. You, my commanders, were right, and now, thanks to Clooney, we know the secret details of the enemy horde's next attack." The abbot slapped a paw down on the plans. "It is all here, but as I have said before, I will not concern myself with the fighting of a war. It is my task to heal the injured and give sustenance to the defenders. It is the duty of you, my generals, to plan the repulse of this invasion." Abbot Mortimer's goals. Okay, Abbot Mortimer is like an exemplary example of what it means to lead with peace at the forefront. I wish I could say that about other people. Matthias held up a paw. "Father Abbot,
It's our duty not only to defend, but to retaliate.
There was a strong murmur of agreement from around the table. The abbot bowed and placed his paws within his wide habit sleeves. "So be it," he said with great solemnity. "I leave the salvation of Redwall to you, my commanders." The abbot bowed once more, then retired for the night, leaving Matthias, Constance, Winifred, Formal, and Ambrose Spike. The meeting continued. They were joined by Basil Staghair and Jess Squirrel. Methuselah also attended to act as mediator and counselor, approving some ideas while discouraging others, calming the hothead and encouraging the timid. Much good sense was talked, and the tone of the meeting was that of creatures who were determined to win at all costs. The discussion, running on sensible lines, went on until it was nearly dawn. It was a confident and satisfied group of friends who shook paws as the meeting ended. Basil insisted on taking Constance to the infirmary to have her wounds treated. The manager tried to shrug him off. "Pah, such a fuss over a few minor scratches," she grumbled. The hare chuckled admiringly. "A few minor scratches? Will you listen to the heroine? Why, my dear Badger, those are honorable wounds gained on the field of combat. I say, Jess, lend a paw here. Have you seen the dreadful gashes that friend Constance has collected? By the left, old girl, you should be hors de combat. Not even a stag could put up with slashes like that. Come on now, let's have you. That's a sensible girl." Constance was led off muttering by Basil and Jess. All the rest retired to their beds with the exception of Matthias and Methuselah. They strolled around the cloisters, savoring the peace of the midnight hours.
"You know, old one, I can't help thinking that a victory would be assured if only we had the warrior's sword," Matthias said.
Methuselah nodded in wistful agreement.
"Indeed it would, but alas for all our efforts. The trail is as cold as a midwinter night. I'm afraid we must resign ourselves to the fact that the sword is lost or hidden somewhere forever."
The old gatehouse keeper leaned upon the young mouse's arm as they walked along. Talking of this and that, eventually the conversation came around to the sparrow's attack upon Jess. Methuselah shook a warning paw.
"Extremely dangerous birds, sparrows, very warlike and quarrelsome. Luckily they can keep to themselves and will only attack if their territory is intruded upon, as you saw today. But by the way, did you see that young one who was brought down by the archers?"
"I certainly did," Matthias replied. "Constance has got the bad-tempered little wretch imprisoned under a wash-basket. What a nasty young villain! The arrow only scratched her, really. It was shock more than anything else that brought her down. Says her name is Warbeak."
Methuselah was taken aback.
"Do you mean to tell me you've talked with her? Remarkable. The sparrow language, or Sparra, as it is called, is very difficult to comprehend."
"Oh, I don't know," said Matthias casually. "I don't find it too hard. At least the little hooligan seems to understand what I'm saying to her."
Methuselah's curiosity was roused.
"And what has she been saying to you, this, Warbeak?"
"Pretty much what you'd expect," Matthias replied. "Either she, or their leader, King Bull Sparrow, is going to kill me. Evidently she looks on anything that can't fly as an enemy."
They strayed over by the gatehouse. The old mouse invited Matthias in for a late nightcap. Methuselah appeared very interested in sparrows. He leafed through his record books.
"Let me see. Summer of the big drought. Winter of the deep drifts. Yes, I think I found it here. Do you remember I told you of a sparrowhawk whom I treated about 4 years back? Well, here's my report. Some small notes I made at the time. This hawk talked of the sparrows. She called them winged mice, though for the life of me I cannot see any comparison between highly civilized mice and those primitive savages. Point was, though, this sparrowhawk said she'd been told that the sparrows once stole an object of great value to her abbey. She didn't say what it was. I thought the bird was merely trying to impress me with idle gossip. I should have questioned her further. We may have found out just what that object was."
Matthias looked pensive.
"Do you think it could have been the sword?"
The old mouse sat tapping his paw upon the record book.
It could have been, Matthias. It could have been. You see, the sparrows never communicate or bother with us. They never fly into our abbey, but up on the roof. Well, that's a different matter. They consider that to be their territory. As I see it, the sword was the only object of value we had up there, although we did not know it at the time. But who else but another bird would know that the sparrows had stolen it?
By the whiskers, old one, Matthias said excitedly. I think you've hit the nail on the head. Do you think that our bad-tempered captive might know something about the rumour? Methuselah grinned mischievously.
Lend me your dagger. I have a simple experiment that I wish to try on our prisoner. Come on.
Matthias escorted his friend to where the basket lay by the abbey walls. There was no sound from within. Methuselah tapped the basket sharply with the blade of the dagger. Warbeak had been caught napping. She came to life in an irritant mood.
Worms! Old worms! You old mouseworm! Stay away! Warbeak! Killy!
Methuselah tried his level best to act tough.
Be silent, you little baggage, or I'll spike you on this dagger, and your king too if he dares to come down.
In a fury, Warbeak smashed her small body against the sides of the basket, causing the old mouse to take a step back.
Ha! Go on, you killy Warbeak with dagger. Wait, see. You not get King Bull Spatter with little worm knife. King have a big sword. Chop all mices up. Killy pretty quick, you betcha.
Methuselah laughed with delight.
You see, the Sparrow King owns a big sword.
Matthias did a cartwheel. He whooped with joy.
Methuselah, you're a magician, an ancient wizard.
The old mouse shook his head modestly.
Oh, dear me, no. I like to think of myself as an aged but extremely erudite scholar.
And Mom, thanks for watching. Les, Jim, Jessica, thanks for watching. Chapter 12. Sitting comfortably propped up on pillows, Clooney sipped a beaker of barley wine as he listened to the improbable tale spun by Seela and Fangbird. They both fidgeted nervously during the course of their deceitful narrative, trying desperately not to contradict one another, while at the same time avoiding the cold and passive eye of the warlord. It was like this, Chief, Fangbird stammered. Me and old Redtooth were keeping our eyes on the fox here, when suddenly Redtooth hears the noise in the woods, so off he goes to investigate.
Where was the noise coming from?
Snapped Clooney. The deceivers spoke together. Northwest, said Seela, said Fangbird simultaneously.
It was sort of northwest.
Seela gulped, realizing how foolish she sounded. Knowing that Clooney was smarter than either of them, she wished she didn't have this big dumb rat to corroborate the story.
So Redtooth went off to see what the noise was,
Seela faltered.
We told him not to go, sir, but he insisted.
Clooney watched Seela's legs shaky.
Go on. What happened then?
He murmured. Fangbird took up the tale again. Well, you see, Chief, he was gone an awful long time. We both called out to him, but there was no answer.
So we both went to look for him, said Seela.
Clooney toyed with the beaker, his eyes bored into the fox.
We searched and searched, sir, Seela mumbled, but all we could find was this big stretch of marshland and bog.
Which poor old Redtooth had wandered into and been sucked down never to be seen again, Clooney supplemented. Seela kept wishing the floor would open up and swallow her. Fangbird sobbed brokenly.
Oh, poor old Redtooth, gone forever.
Yes, our poor friend Redtooth,
Clooney agreed sympathetically. Suddenly his voice hardened as he shot a question at Fangbird.
You! How did your face get knocked about, and where did you get those long scratches from?
Seela jumped in hastily.
You walked into a big thorn tree, didn't you, Fangbird?
What? Oh, yes. I was dashing about and I didn't see it, Chief. The fox could tell you she saw it, and if she didn't, well, I already told her, said Fangbird, his voice trailing off miserably. Clooney laughed mirthlessly. His fangs showing yellow and sharp.
So you walked into a big thorn tree and got 2 black eyes, a torn ear, and your whole hide covered in long scratches.
Fangbird stared at the floor. He had to swallow twice before he could answer. His voice subdued. That's what happened, Chief.
Clooney's tone was laden with sarcasm. And then I suppose that 3 little pigs with wings flew down and gave you a toffee apple each.
Yes, I mean, what was that, Chief? Ouch! Fangbird hopped on one leg as Sela kicked his ankle to silence him.
You, fox!
Clooney snarled.
Where's the special herb you went to search for?
Sela was completely nonplussed.
Special herb?
Clooney hurled the beaker. It bounced off Fangbird's nose, splashing barley wine over them.
Get out! Get out of my sight! Before I have you tortured and roasted!
Clooney roared at the unlucky pair. There was an undignified scramble. The door slammed shut behind the conspirators. Clooney lay back and smirked. Everything was going according to plan. He had lost Redtooth, but what the devil? Redtooth had been an ambitious rat. Clooney only admired ambition in one rodent. Himself. Far off in Mossflower Wood, the night breezes stirred the treetops gently. The moon rode in a cloudless sky, its pale light filtered through the waving foliage to create the beautiful but strange effect of a shimmering, swaying carpet on the woodland floor. Asmodeus. The covering of dead moonlight vegetation on the ground trembled and rustled. What better cover than a light breeze and a hunter's moon? Glittering black eyes searched the night. A forked tongue tasted the air. The small living plants appeared to shudder as the long, scaly body brushed by them, trailing its way along. Asmodeus. Softly rustling, deceptive as the speckled shadows, the huge adder roamed his domain. Patience and stealth were acquired by long experience. Sometimes the serpent would lie totally inert, awaiting the unsuspecting paw that trod too close. Other times it would raise itself, uncoiling to look into bushes for eggs and birds on the nest. Some nights it was lean, hunting. Many creatures sensed the approach of the slithering evil, or scented its dry, musty, death-like odor. The snake had often gone hungry at times like these, but patience and stealth. A lesson soon learned is a meal soon earned. At the foot of the sycamore, the adder stretched itself alongside the still form of Redtooth. Well, an unexpected bonus. This was another rat that could not scurry off. No expenditure of venom or hypnosis needed. How fortunate. The huge reptile coiled itself languorously around the dead rodent. Asmodeus. No need of burial parties. Nature and the woodlands took care of their own funeral arrangements. There was but one efficient undertaker. The adder's jaws opened in something resembling the nightmare of a smile. The pathway to eternity was open. And that is where we are going to end for today. Thank you all so much for joining me. I'm trying to whisper a bit because my lovely friend Jessica and her newborn son Mattis are taking a nap. So, trying to be conscious of my volume. But I will see you all tomorrow.